Welcome to the Goretti Publications podcast. This is Donald Goodman. You are listening to Season 1, Episode 2. For Part 1 of the show, let's briefly discuss the need for structure in poetry. We mentioned last time that, to be poetry, the lines must have structure, and we will elaborate on that a little today. For the difference between poetry and prose is precisely that structure. Prose is simply text, while poetry is text structured in a particular and formal way. Obviously, prose is also structured, but not the way that poetry is. Prose involves free-flowing text without linguistic-based structures like meter, rhyme, alliteration, or similar forms. Some prose is quite poetic, in the sense that it utilizes some of these elements, but it need not, and usually does not, do so. Furthermore, there is no necessary relation between the structure of elements of prose. Each element, whether it be a phrase, a sentence, or something else, is a creature unto itself. Poetry, however, is structured into lines, with a structure that is precisely linguistically based. There are many different ways to structure those lines. In English, we typically use meter, rhyme, or both. But historically, we have used alliteration, and some poets have made very powerful use of only stressed meter, the sprung meter of Gerard Manley Hopkins, for example. In other languages, the structure may be very different, but it is precisely this linguistic structure that makes poetry different from prose, a consistent, linguistic structure that divides the text into clearly defined lines. Note that these lines are not necessarily physical, though these days we typically print them as such. They are an internal form, even if the lines are printed end-to-end with no regard for typographical niceties. The lines are determined by the structure, not the visual appearance of the printing. Which leads us to so-called free verse, or vers libre. This type of poetry defines itself specifically by rejecting all forms of linguistic structure. Its practitioners will deny, of course, that it does this. T.S. Eliot, for example, one of its more well-known practitioners, once stated that, quote, "No verse is free for the man who wants to do a good job," unquote. He also stated that, quote, "The division between conservative verse and vers libre does not exist, for there is only good verse, bad verse, and chaos." And it is refreshing that he, along with some others, acknowledge that poetry is not poetry without at least some structure. However, like most free verse poets, Eliot fails to give us any real alternative for the structure of traditional poetry. Typically, they suggest things like the cadence of natural speech, which makes one wonder how poetry and prose differ at all. And that is the rub, of course. A free verse poem read aloud is indistinguishable from a piece of prose read aloud, unless the reader is determined to read it in a very artificial way. This is true because even though individual lines might have some structure, even though the poet may intend to mimic the rhythm or cadence of normal speech, he's really just writing prose and inserting unusual line breaks. Poetry is text organized into lines, which have a consistent and clearly defined linguistic structure. Other text is merely prose. For Part 2, our poem for today is titled, Winter's Joy. Oh, the winter! Can winter be healthy? Can winter provide what the warmer months can't? Can the death of all growing things bring further life? Can the reaper come also to plant? When the snow blankets all and the icicles fall, can a flower still blossom and bloom? Can there be love and laughter and jubilant life from the depths of the frozen cold tomb? Over all there is snow, and the grass cannot grow, and the leaves have all withered away. And the snow muffles sound as it blankets the ground, and the creatures have nothing to say. What a beautiful sight as the sun's golden light starts to sparkle and shine off the snow. But the branches so bare, weighed by crystalline care, bend and buckle and sway to and fro. Hanging down from the limbs like old Damocles' sword, threaten shining bright crystalline blades, spelling death down below to poor wandering souls who aren't watchful enough in the glades. For their beauty doth shine so exceedingly fine that they're objects of wonder, not fear. But their beauty can't save the cracked skull of the knave who too carelessly thought to draw near. And the cold is so bracing and crisp, nibbling gently on slightly exposed nose and ear, flushing skin to a lively red color for all those around all the more to endear. But as time flows a while, every blushing cold smile is replaced by a grimace of pain. For the nibbles now bite, and the cold once a friend won't forever wield frostbite in vain. What say we to the cold and the freezing when winter's fine cheerfulness turns into woe? When the ice is no longer so charming, when happiness buries itself in the snow? Can we play as of old in the skin-piercing cold, as if frozen regret never came? Can a life still have joy when the cause of our mirth and our sorrows are one and the same? From beneath heavy snow I say yes, it is so. There is joy in the cold of the grave. There's a joy that is high even more than the sky, for the men who know who makes the save. For the men with the mark it will never grow dark, for that mark shines with warmth and with light. For these men never freeze whom the mark ever frees, they are warmed by the heat of the right. The meter here is anapestic heptameter, a mouthful that deserves a little explanation. The second word, heptameter, is clear enough from our first episode. Each line consists of 7 feet. An anapest, or anapestic foot, is a 3-syllable foot made up of 2 unstressed syllables followed by a stressed one. So, for example, iambic meter would be da-da, da-da, da-da. These are iambs, 1 unstressed syllable followed by 1 stressed one. Anapests, on the other hand, sound like so. Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. These are anapests, 2 unstressed syllables followed by 1 stressed one. Anapestic heptameter, as a meter, is very bouncy and familiar. It yields longer lines that sound almost like prose speech, yet are still clearly structured and have clear beginning and ending points. It lends a very lively feel to the poem, even when it is discussing difficult and sometimes depressing themes, as this one does. There is also a rhyme scheme here. Each stanza is made up of 2 couplets, which rhyme at the end. A couplet is a 2-line unit. Sometimes these rhyme at the end, sometimes they don't. A standalone couplet of rhyming iambic pentameter is a special case, often referred to as a heroic couplet. Chaucer, Dryden, and Pope are poets who famously made excellent use of them. Some of our lines here also have internal rhyme. There is an extra rhyme added halfway through. An excellent example would be line 107. Can we play as of old in the skin-piercing cold, as if frozen regret never came? These are extra rhymes that don't terminate the line, but still add a very interesting linguistic undercurrent to the metered and rhyming structure of the whole. The poem's meaning can be easily discerned. It begins by discussing winter, and asking how a season which is literally defined by death can possibly be considered healthy. It notes the blanket of snow, overall there is snow, and how lovely it can be. What a beautiful sight as the sun's golden light starts to sparkle and shine off the snow. But notes that this beauty conceals nothing but death and danger, referring to branches so bare which bend and buckle and sway to and fro. The third and fourth stanzas present similar considerations about different aspects of the season. The reference to the sword of Damocles is well known enough that it requires no explanation. The fifth stanza asks how we should consider this, that a season that brings us such joy will also bring us suffering and difficulty. And the sixth wraps up the point. Yes, there is joy that comes from suffering, for those who know what suffering really means. We refer to the men with the mark, this is the mark of baptism, who despite the cold will persevere thanks to that mark. The mark of our baptism will solidify us through suffering and warm us through all cold. Thank you for listening, and until next time, this has been the Goretti Publications Podcast. Our intro and outro music is Woodland Fantasy by Matthew Pablo, generously released under the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. We have made no changes other than clipping and fading as appropriate. The license is available at creativecommons.org/licenses/by/3.0, and the song itself is available at opengameart.org/content/woodland-fantasy. Mr. Pablo's website is matthewpablo.com. Our use of this material does not imply his endorsement in any way. This has been the Goretti Publications Podcast, gorpub.freeshell.org. Thank you for listening.